Welcome to the Unlist. You'd be happy I'm actually in pants today, as you can see. Pants and not pajamas. So be happy. Be proud of me. I thought I might do something different for this episode. I thought I might give you some fragrant stories. These are not fictional stories, though. These are stories based on history, either my own personal history with a fragrance or the history of the brand itself. In the case of the latter, where it's a story involving a brand's own history, it's often something that is out there, but not widely publicized. So you won't find it on the first page of Google results. It's something that you have to deep Google to find, but it is not fabrication. It is just truths that are sometimes somewhat lost to time, as it were. But it's there for if you dig for it, it's there. So anyway, let's get started. My first fragrance story is going to be one that's actually about the fragrance brand, not about me or my use of or relation to a fragrance. And we will do with English leather. So I do have a personal story regarding this fragrance, and I will tell you that in a second. But first, something about the brand history you may not have known. So the original manufacturer of English leather before Dana was a company called MEM. Now, MEM was originally a European toiletry manufacturer. I believe they were based out of Denmark. It could be Amsterdam, but they were not French. They were European. And what happened was they had soaps and different things, but they wanted a standalone fragrance, a toiletry that could just be a scent by itself. So they reached out to a perfumer named Javier Serra. Some of you may recognize that name because Javier Serra was the perfumer who would launch the brand Dana. Okay? So in the 30s, he would launch Dana. But Javier Serra said, sure, I'll make you a fragrance. I think he was friends with the founder of MEM, or the family, because MEM actually started in the late 19th century. So he was friends with some of the family. And again, you can find all this online if you go digging. So Javier Serra created the original formula of the fragrance that would become English leather, but at that time it wasn't known as English leather. When it was finally launched, it was called Russian leather, because Russian leather perfumes and colognes were very popular. Okay, Farina had one. Chanel had one at some point. Many brands had a Russian leather. A Clia de Russie, if you say it, I butcher the word, but Clia de Russie, something along those lines. Or just Russian leather, or Russisch leather, if you're going to use the German or whatever. But there were different forms of it, and this fragrance, for a time, was called Russian leather. Now, obviously, World War II happened. Before that, though, Javier Serra dropped his association with MEM, and he launched Dana, where many perfumes would come out, like Taboo and Canoe and 20 Carats. A lot of things created by Jean Carles, who was kind of the unofficial house perfumer for a number of years. A lot of creations for Dana were Jean Carles creations. But ultimately, the Russian leather fragrance would be relaunched and rebranded in 1949 as English leather after the MEM Corporation moved from Europe to the United States. And the reason why they left Europe and rebooted themselves effectively in the US was World War II. So I don't know if it was because they were escaping potential Nazi possession of their properties. if you guys know, during World War II, a lot of countries that the Germans took over, invaded, they would nationalize the private assets. So maybe that was an attempt to escape that. But whatever the case may be, they moved to the U.S. to avoid any complications of World War II, and they never came back. They never came back to Europe. They just basically became an American company. And when they launched this fragrance in 1949, they were like, well, we don't want to call it Russian leather because by 49, the Soviet Union had been established and the relations between the United States and the Soviet Union weren't great, right? It was the beginnings of the Cold War, and you guys know all about the Cold War. So launching a product called Russian leather is probably not a great idea. It's one of the reasons why the Elsha fragrance eventually became 1776. They stopped calling it Russian leather too, for much the same reason, because people just didn't have a healthy opinion of Russia or anything of Eastern European origin because of the Soviet Union and the Cold War. So in 1949, that fragrance, created by the founder of Dana, launched as Russian leather, became English leather in the United States, and was marketed towards men. It was originally a unisex fragrance, kind of like Nietzsche 10, another leather fragrance. I often call English leather the down market Nietzsche 10 because it has a very similar aldehyde opening, a lot of powdery notes, iris in the heart, very mossy, obviously, very sharp. It's got isobutylquinoline in it, so it's got that really, punchy, pungent sort of tanning rack leather smell. It's not a dark leather. It's not a heavy birch tar leather fragrance, which is funny because most Russian leather fragrances, as you know, are very heavy on birch. This is not a heavy on birch fragrance. This goes more for that aldehydic tannery vibe, which is what Nietzsche 10 also has, right? That was Francois Coty and Vincent Rubert created that. So this likely was a attempt to copy it originally. We don't have any proof of that. That's my conjecture. That's my postulation, whatever you want to call it, hypotheses. But the close smell and the years being so close together, the chances are pretty high that this was an attempt to be an also ran, to be a Me Too. You know, if Nietzsche 10 is Invictus Aqua, then English leather is like Mont Blanc Legend Spirit. Yeah, Mont Blanc Legend Spirit, basically. That other one's Invictus. But obviously, when this was launched in America as English leather, it took on a life of its own, marketed to men, became very popular. This became a very stalwart competitor for good old Shelton Old Spice. For a time, these were Pepsi and Coke in the United States. Okay, either you were a English leather guy or you were an Old Spice guy. You weren't both. Some guys maybe had both, like the guys who drink Coke and Pepsi, both, depending on what's on sale. But if you were a staunch Old Spice user, then you were not someone who liked to use English leather. And the two of these kind of fought like that for a long time. You know. Now, my personal story surrounding this fragrance is this is a late 90s bottle, one of the first bottles produced by what was then New Renaissance Cosmetics, or New Dana. And you will look at the bottom and it will say New Dana Perfumes Corporation, Mountaintop, PA 18707. Just like my bottles of Monsieur Musk. It was from that period when Dana was owned by New Renaissance, and all the formulas from the previous houses, whether it was MEM, whether it was Houbigant, whatever it was, Jacqueline Smith, were carried over They weren't in the habit of reformulating or recomposing. They were repackaging. New Dana, New Renaissance was all about taking these licenses from these dying brands, these dying houses. British Sterling is the same way. Spital Textron. Taking these licenses from these dying brands and picking up the ball and running with the ball. Keeping the manufacturing contracts in place, keeping the bottling in place, keeping all the distributors in place. They were now the ones paying the bills, keeping the lights on, keeping the fragrances alive. And that's what they were doing. That would eventually run them bankrupt. I could do a video about New Dana and New Renaissance and all that, and I should do that later on. But the moral to the story is transitionary period, because once New Dana would go bankrupt trying to carry on these legacy brands, they would be bought by another outside interest and then reorganized as Dana Classic. And Dana Classic is the garbage. I warn you guys, don't buy the Dana Classic. The Dana Classic, those are all reformulated, in many cases completely recomposed. They just GCMS the bottles and then cheapen the formula up as much as possible. Make it as garbagey, make it as cheap as they can, and shit it back out. And that's why new bottles of British Sterling, new bottles of English leather, new bottles of basically anything, Chantilly, they all suck. They all suck. And it's unfortunate, but that's how it goes. I bought this bottle when I was a teenager. And when I emptied it, it took me a while because this is very potent stuff, guys. This is not weak. It was into the 2000s. So about a decade. It took me about a decade to really empty this. But once I had, I was like, man, I want to buy more. And I bought more. And it was the Dana Classic stuff, which I have that bottle right here. Let me go get that for you. It's so bad I've banished it, okay? So bad that I banished it, but I kept it as a warning of what not to buy. So yeah, here is the horrible Dana Classic. This is how much of it I used before I realized vintage existed. I was stupid back then. In my 20s, I was dumb. I didn't realize you could go on eBay. Okay, I didn't realize you could get older bottles of stuff back then. I just dealt with what was there. So I suffered through this much of this bottle before I realized I could get vintage, but I still kept this one. Why? Because first of all, I got this, and the really cheap paper label disgusted me. Like, oh man, it's not even the right font anymore. It's a different font now. This looks really cheap. And this is just nothing but white musk and some kind of like suederol, weird suederol material. Oh yeah, that is vile. That is wretched stuff there. That is not even barely even English leather in that bottle. It's more like English pleather. There you go. It's like English vinyl. So this was empty and I was sad. But I liked how the bottle was silk printed like that. See how it's silk printed? I liked that. So that was cool. So I kept it. And then I went on eBay and I found these. And they're probably not as cheap as they used to be because they were a dime a dozen originally. They're still probably cheaper than they would be. I mean, I'm sure they're not super crazy expensive, but I found a bunch of these little travel bottles, little plastic 1 ounce bottles. And these, lo and behold, are original MEM company bottles. And they're original MEM bottles. And they have the matching logo and the matching font and everything. So these are even older than this. Because this was, like I said, this was New Dana. This is mid-90s when they took over. When these guys went bankrupt and these guys picked up the ball. But New Dana was a different animal from Dana Classic, as I said. I will die on that hill, okay? I will completely die on that hill. New Dana, very brief period, but they were respectful, very respectful. They kept the formulas, like I said. Now, you might have guessed what I did here by showing you those. I filled this bottle back up. And I have been filling this bottle back up for the last 20 years. So this bottle has probably held 5 or 6 bottles of this juice now, because now that I can refill it, I use it much more often. I'm not as sparing on it as I was in the 90s and early 2000s when I was a teenager. Now I just, whatever. And I even found a aftershave and stuff. So, and a friend of mine recently gave me a bottle of period aftershave. Actually, here it is, another travel size bottle, but works for me just fine. So if you ever wonder why I have this bottle, but the juice inside is dark, it wouldn't normally be this dark from this period. This period it was lighter, more straw colored, because I've got like 70s and 80s juice in here. And this is not wilted or turned. It was just darker. If you bought a vintage bottle of this from the 70s or 80s, they were black bottles, by the way. Black bottles, big like walnut colored caps. I don't like them because they just look too weird and baroque to me. This 90s period is my favorite bottle, but if you were to take those black bottles and dump the juice out, it would be dark like this. So I have a very unique bottle of English leather. Okay, you won't find anyone else with a 90s bottle holding 70s and 80s juice. So, little story. It's my English leather story. Now, some other fun stories. Other fun stories relating to perfume. Is we're gonna have a little bit of fun with this one. We're gonna talk a little bit about where is it? Right here. This one doesn't really have a brand story. This was another personal story. So think about Joop, as it's supposed to be pronounced, Joop Ohm. I was given this bottle for like my, I don't know, 16th birthday, something like that. This is a deep vintage Lancaster bottle. You notice because it says Lancaster on it, and 2, it's got a little flower up here. Only the old, really, really old bottles have the flower on them like that. So, my best friend at the time bought me this. And let me tell you what. I'm not the kind of person that turns down gifts. But this stuff was just so strong and so out of this world. I could not really wear this. I was like, wow, this stuff is just like nuclear. This is like radioactive. So I'm like, thank you. And I wore it like when I would go, you know how you use something to make your gift giver happy, like you use it when they're around. So I would wear this when he was around. Look, I'm wearing the thing you gave me. It's cool. So, but then what happened was I barely touched it. Now this bottle is like 30 years old, right? Barely touched it. And then fast forward to the 2000s. I get a job at Walmart. And I'm still in my 20s. I get a job at Walmart. And there's a guy that works in Walmart named Fred. The infamous Fred from Toys. And if you worked in the Carroll Island Walmart store in Middle River, Maryland, shout out. You probably remember Fred from Toys if you worked there in the 2000s. He was this older, heavy-set guy, had the crow's nest up top. So basically friar tuck around the sides, nothing up top. heavyset guy. He looked almost like a mixture between, you know, he kind of struck me as almost like if you were to take like a Sam Kinison and mix him with a little bit of like gosh, like a Sam Kinison and a Dan DeVito, but then slap a mustache on him. It's kind of what he looked like. So, um, I'm sure there's a lid for every pot, but he wasn't really a ladies' man. Let's just put it that way. However, be that as it may, he absolutely wore Joop, and he wore the old Joop because we're talking the 2000s. Lancaster was still making it then, and he just completely drenched himself. Now, keep in mind, this stuff is so strong that like two sprays of this is like hazardous materials. Okay, you put 2 shots of this original, you know, deep vintage bottle. You put 2 shots of this on, and you probably violated some local ordinance somewhere. You put on 3 or 4 sprays of this, and you just violated the Geneva Convention. Okay, so NATO's going to bomb your house if you put 4 sprays of this on yourself. And honestly, Fred was probably somewhere around 6, because I worked in electronics, which was in that particular Walmart. Electronics was basically back end of the store, but the opposite corner. So if you go all the way to the back, electronics was in the back right hand side, toys back left hand side. And Walmarts are not small. No Walmart is small. So if you were working in the furthest back right corner of the store, and someone else is working in a department that is literally at the opposite corner and is probably at least 1,000 feet away, if not more, and you can smell the Joop coming off of him, like you could smell him as if he was standing next to you, and then the smell only got stronger and more offensive when he was visible. When he broke line of sight, suddenly it was like now you can taste the fragrance. Him breaking line of sight meant you could taste the fragrance. It got so bad that literally we had the store manager asking him, and this is why you have rules now in like workplaces about not wearing cologne, because people like Fred, people like Fred from Toys, were just, I don't know, nose blind, dead inside, maybe, I don't know, soulless husk, you know, a creature that had broken free from the confines of its containment and was stalking the earth looking for fresh souls to devour. I don't know, guys. Okay, but he was literally fumigating the store with this stuff. And if it is possible to have PTSD from a fragrance, and it's not like something that you should make fun of, but in this case, I'm going to break and have a little bit of dark humor for a change. If it is possible to get PTSD from a fragrance, you would have gotten it from him, from Fred from Toys in the Carroll Island Walmart in Middle River, Maryland. It was something else. And I was already not one to wear this very much. So you can imagine how little I wanted to wear this even more. The withering effect of him basically killing every roach and silverfish and making every like fly and moth drop from the sky within like 1,000 yards of him. Yeah, man. That is why to this day, 2025, people are like, what is the most beast mode? What is the most baller beast mode club banger? Yo, gotta get me them compliments. Right? People ask me that stupid question, and I'm like, okay. You really want the most beast mode, baller, guns up, you know, whatever stupid brain rotted shit you're asking me. You want that in a fragrance? You want this. And not just any bottle of this, but an original, deep vintage, Lancaster, fucking flower, acting as a warning sign. Literally, beware of the contents. You want this. Because if you wear this, then everyone within like 1,000 miles of you will try to burrow themselves underground to escape your sillage, to escape your weapons grade, Geneva Convention violating, smell. That is how strong this is. And that is my personal story for Joop Home. I've managed to get this far down, so we're about halfway now. We're about halfway down. 30 years. If I have 30 more years left on this planet, I'll be in my 70s. I might finish the bottle. And no, I'm not giving it to you. No, I'm not trading it. I keep this on a matter of principle. Because one, it was a gift from my best friend, and I've had it for a long time. And two, I would not give this to my worst enemy. Right? I'm not going to enable someone. What I do wear in its place, though, let me tell you. The old Mont Blanc Individuel, which came out in 2003. And this fragrance, Mikel, I think it's Almirac, I'm saying it properly, Almirac. Mikel Almirac and Pierre Bourdon both worked on Joop Homme, but this was a solo act of Pierre Bourdon by himself. Mikel Almirac was not around for this, but this is like Pierre Bourdon taking the basic concept that was in Joop Homme from '89 and refining it, making it cleaner, making it smoother, making it spicier, making it literally more civil to be around, more polite. He took the beast that was Joop Homme and basically made it into a gentleman with this. And thus I love this fragrance, and I wear this fragrance a lot more. So that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm at, right? That gives you an idea of where I'm at. This one I greatly enjoy. That one still scares me. So is that not the right place? I guess not. There it is. All right. Yeah. So, alrighty. And we are getting close to the end of the video because I can't do more than 34 minutes before my camera roll shuts off because it says, maximum memory, 4 gigabyte memory limit exceeded. Can't do more than 34 minutes. So this last one will be a short story for you guys. And I will put a volume 1 on the end of this video because I'm sure you guys will want a part 2 where I can tell you more fragrance stories. But here is the third story. This one's going to be a brand story. So, the brand story. A Tale of Two Fragrances. In the early 2000s, Calvin Klein was kind of at the peak of their popularity. They were coming off the back of the CK1 and CKB fragrances being really huge. Eternity was really huge. Even in the 2000s, Eternity was really huge. Obsession was really huge. You had Eternity, Escape, CK1, CKB, Obsession. The jeans sold like hotcakes. The underwear, thanks to Michael J. Fox, Mark Wahlberg, handful of others, underwear was tremendously successful. T-shirts, all that stuff. So they were up on themselves. They were feeling confident. So they said, why release one fragrance for men when we can break it down into age groups? Break it down into age groups and release 2. One will be for the young guy, and one will be for the mature, older guy, but not too old. There's a cutoff. So this one was sold to millennials who in 2002 were mostly still teenagers, or maybe early, because I'm at the very end of millennial. I'm an exennial, so yeah, teenagers. So teenagers got this one, and anyone who was over the age of 25 but under the age of 40 would buy this one. That's really weird. So if you're over 40, Calvin Klein's telling you to fuck off. Don't buy their cologne if you're over the age of 40. I'm 43. I don't care. But I'm just saying. This was a disaster because it is a plastic fragrance. In a plastic bottle, housed in a plastic photon torpedo. And it is the most shrill, nostril-burning, ozonic thing I've ever smelled in my life. And even though I have a soft spot for it, because of nostalgia, right? I have a soft spot for it. It is objectively not a good fragrance. Never was. It is very loud, very shrill. And you couldn't give this away. When this launched, it flopped so hard. You couldn't give this away. And for years, it was $14, $15 all day, every day. Nowadays, you've got the influencers and the idiot people that put this on a pedestal or whatever. They try to say it was hidden genius. It was misunderstood, underappreciated, lost masterpiece, all this big hyperbolic talk, superlatives out the ass. And then they want hundreds of dollars for this, $200, whatever, stupid prices for this. Because they can't get it. They want what they can't have, right? Meanwhile, this one was the far better fragrance. A fresh, and I've discussed this already in my green video I did, my green fragrances video. Fresh, dewy, violet leaf, eucalyptus, lavender, a very light, like fern accord, minus the heavy tonka. So imagine having a fougere accord, but the tonka is barely there. A little bit of aquatic nuances. This is kind of like a kissing cousin to Eau de Cartier Concentré. If you're a fan of Eau de Cartier Concentré, this is like a kissing cousin to it. Much better fragrance, but no one loves it. And no one loves it because it's not rare and not discontinued. So people want the nasty, horrible, Lysol, shrill, deodorizer smelling fragrance because it has the weird plastic packaging and the weird photon torpedo case. But the far better fragrance that really should be getting more love and attention, people don't want. But remember, Calvin Klein says, if you're over 40, you can't wear this anyway. So you're stuck. I guess you got to wear Obsession. I don't know. But yeah, they never did that again. Moral of the story is they learned their lesson never to do that again. Not to try and break people down into age groups, right? Because just make one men's fragrance. Make it appealing to as wide of a demographic as you want. Don't be like, only for teenagers, only for 30-somethings. And if you're old fart, fuck off, can't have our perfume. The fragrance stories. And this has been the Unlist. And catch you later. You catch me later. Whatever. Someone's going to catch someone later. It'll be great. Whoa, vertical.